Hey everybody, I'm Jacob, that's Riley. We were joined with Arthur and Nancy, and together we made up the Healthcare Climate Initiative team for this summer. And to kind of introduce it, I'll go through the overview of what the project was and kind of our main goals. So like Chris said, we're circuit riders in sorts, but this time only to hospitals, not to other companies. So we went around Kansas, going to different hospitals, and with the goal of finding ways to simply save energy, money, and through those things, reduce greenhouse gas emissions through that. So the thing that was pushing this project forward was the health sector climate pledge. At the start of our reports to the companies, we would explain what that is. Some of the hospitals had already signed it prior to going, but some hadn't too. So we explained what that was, which is 50% reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 and cutting to net zero by 2050. Those are the goals that we're trying to get them to push toward. And then the rest of the report then would be outlining what we found, ways that they can save energy and try and go ahead and meet that goal. I think it's really cool that this isn't the last year that this project will go on. It'll be continued next year with different interns, and that'll be super sweet because they can see what we recommended if they were implemented and what kind of things were saved over that year. So they'll be able to reap the fruit of our labor, I guess you could say.
So in total, we visited 6 different hospitals. They were Community Memorial Healthcare in Marysville, NMC Health in Newton, Hayes Med in Hayes, Nemaha Valley Community Hospital in Seneca, Holton Community Hospital in Holton, and Wilson Medical Center in Neoche. The most common projects that we had on our reports were LED light conversions, water leaks, and an analysis of the cafeteria and their utensils and trays, compressed air leaks, the building envelope, and the boiler room insulation. We'll go over each of these. For LED light conversions, usually we would start that right when we got there. Just by observation, we would see if their parking lots were using LEDs or metal halide. Then we would go in and ask whoever was showing us around if they were doing an LED conversion yet. Most hospitals were in the process. They were waiting for bulbs to die before they replaced them with LEDs. If they weren't using LEDs, they were all using either metal halide, high pressure sodium, or fluorescent tubes, depending on the area. In most cases, for the fluorescent lighting tubes, we would recommend ballast bypass bulbs because they did not want to have to rewire fixtures to get rid of all the ballast because they have hundreds of fixtures in a single hospital. But we didn't run into trouble with that because they have emergency fixtures in all the hospitals. And a couple of them told us we do not want to put LED tubes in our emergency fixtures because we had the power go out. And when the backup generator came on, the lights didn't work, which has to do with the ballast. They would have to rewire the ballast, which, like I said, they don't want to do. So in those cases, we would just leave that out of the calculations. And then if they were metal halide or high pressure sodium, we would just try to find an LED equivalent that they could use. Here in the moving from left to right in the images, in the bottom left was an example of a place that they were doing a conversion already. In the right light, they had an LED bulb, and in the left, they had a metal halide. The top middle picture is another metal halide bulb that was used on a building envelope. And then on the right, you can see in one room where on the right, they had an LED fixture in, and then on the left, it was fluorescent. In total, for all the hospitals, we had calculated about 204,760 kilowatt hours reduced, or $19,036 saved. Another thing that we would look for is water leaks. These were a fairly common occurrence in boiler rooms and sterilizer rooms. They were most commonly found around water pumps. Many hospitals had multiple water pumps, and some of them were leaking a lot of water. to the point where it was eroding the floor and the pump itself. and just causing corrosion to anything near it. And many hospitals try to account for this by just putting a drain next to the pump or having some sort of, or they like drilled a hole that went to a drain, but they would not have any sort of incline or decline for water to go down into the drain. And so it would just result in it pooling like everywhere, and then only some of it would go in the drain. So that in my opinion, the biggest cost of that is the damage that it could cause. Here we have some pictures. On the left was just a basic, very small leak from a pipe junction. And then moving left to right, the second image was in a sterilizer room. They had a little back room for their autoclaves, and they had multiple pipes leaking from the ceiling. The third image, which is a bit small, I apologize for that, was a water pump that just had a massive pool of water around it, and it was corroding the base of it completely. The top right was another leaky water pump junction in a pool pump room. And then the bottom right was a dishwasher we found that was pouring water out of the front door while they ran it. In total, we estimated that about 6,829 liters of water was reduced and only about $4.89 saved. But that's not accounting for the damage or possible damage that could be done by the water. That water reduced is kind of a pretty big approximation, because sometimes we could get a somewhat accurate reading of it if we could count the number of drips per second, or if we got a video of it and we could look at it later. But sometimes we would come in and there'd just be a pool of water, and we would have to basically estimate, about how much water we thought it would leak in a day. We also took a look at the cafeteria, and in most cases, the processes and storage of the cafeterias were great. They really know what they're doing. But the one thing that we found issue with was during the COVID pandemic, all hospitals switched to disposable trays and utensils. And a lot of them had not switched back. All but one, I think, had switched back to reusable trays, but pretty much none of them had done a full conversion back to reusable utensils. They gave us a few reasons for this. One hospital said that their silverware got stolen too much, and so they didn't want to go back to having silverware. And then another one said that it's convenient for employees. They would take their meals to their office, and they wouldn't want to have to walk back to the cafeteria to return it. They wanted to just throw it in the garbage. But we decided to do calculations for how much plastic and money they would save if they went back to all reusable. The images, those are just some basic storage areas that were in one of the hospitals we went in for where they stored all their plastic trays and utensils and things. We found that in all hospitals total, about 8.57 tons of plastic could be reduced every year, and about $90,000 or $90,891 could be saved.
Okay, yeah, on the compressed air leaks. So we would go about finding compressed air leaks similarly to some of the other interns with the UV systems ultrasonic leak detector. We had other strategies too, simply listening without it when the room was too loud, or even feeling around with your hands to find big ones was strategies we implemented as well. We did not find as many compressed air leaks as I thought we would find throughout our 6 hospitals that we visited. Specifically, the medical air systems of these hospitals were really tight. It's super important, so it makes sense when you think about it to routinely check those. So yeah, they had, a lot of them had like charts of check times and when the people came down to look at them. So specifically medical air was really tight. We rarely found issues with that. And even the regular compressed air systems were really tight as well with these hospitals. Some hospitals had very new renovations, and so we didn't find too much there. There's also not as many lines exposed, I think, as compared to like a manufacturing facility. So we were checking like the source of the compressed air system a lot of the time, and the pipes that went out from there. So we weren't able to like follow lines through the walls. Yeah. On the far right there, you see one of the mid-air leaks that we did find. It was under that silver cup. There was a couple, a second silver cup that had a similar leak. And then on the left middle side, that was a regular compressed air leak. The sealant's coming off a little bit on the lower, the bottom lower part of that pipe that you can see. And even those two though were very mild, so only about $30 in estimated savings for the compressed air leak project. Building envelope. So if you don't know what a building envelope is, essentially it's the barrier that keeps the internal and external environments of the building the same, stops heat flow and energy flow between the two. So what the team would do is we'd go around the building and check for damage in window insulation, damage in windows themselves, gaps between doors, damage in the walls, anything that would allow heat to leak into or out of the building depending on the season. So if we found a piece of damage, then we would take a picture of the damage and then also take a screenshot of the pan on Google Maps where the damage was, so that the hospital, if they did choose to repair the damage, wouldn't have to go chase the window that probably looks the same as all the other windows. So they would know exactly where it was. There's some pictures of building envelope issues that we found. On the lower right, that issue was super common. The little black window insulation piece being cut too short. Almost every hospital had that issue, and if they had that issue, it was the case with a lot of their windows. So I don't know what processes are being done for cutting those, but it's not working very well. This is common. And then the other three obviously are doors, gaps between the doors, which is super common. A lot of those you can even see through, so undoubtedly leaking heat into or out of the building, impacting energy bills and gas bills depending on if it's winter or summer. So, and I'll also say that we didn't attach calculations to this specific project because as circuit riders, we didn't feel like we had enough time to gather the information needed for that, but we did make it known in our reports that those calculators do exist, and if they want to pursue that themselves, they're able to, but also PPI will be back next summer. So if they're really interested in getting numbers associated with these issues, then they can ask that be done. Under the boiler room, in the boiler room, we would check pipes for their installations and also steam traps. Steam traps, we did not find anything broken. Also, it is summer, so some of them were not very active, not being used very much. So that makes sense. But the piping was a big thing for us. We used the FLIR infrared camera to go around and find the pipes that were simply too hot and check if they were insulated or not. And if they weren't, take a picture of them with a FLIR camera and a normal camera so that we can do a little side-by-side in the report that you'll see here. So the top right was pipe we found in Marysville. That was one of the hotter ones we found. Below that's another pipe, and then on the right was a boiler that had an access panel that was not insulated properly on the openings, and you can see in the infrared pictures that it is indeed leaking heat. Again, another pipe on the top left connected to a boiler, and on the right was a water heater that had a little gap between the thermometer insert. There was a second water heater that was properly closed, so we know it can be done. Almost $500 in savings for the installation projects with 30,000 kilowatt hours. And here's a table summarizing our results. We estimate a total of $110,448 of savings with 253,000 kilowatt hours and 8.5 tons of plastic, thanks to the plasticware, and 3,675 liters of water with 254 metric tons of CO2. Any questions?
So did you ask how much silverware was being stolen? Because I'm assuming that like what you're saying they could save per year is more than what they pay in replacing reusable silverware.
Yeah, I don't think, we didn't ask, but they hadn't implemented normal silverware in about like 2 or 3 years. And so I'm not sure if they would even have a figure for it. And it wasn't just silverware. I did put silverware on there, but they said even whole plates were being stolen apparently too. So I'm not really sure.
Were you guys able to benchmark the energy use of each hospital?
Yeah, there were 2 different hospitals that wanted benchmarking done. Most of them already had Energy Star accounts set up and had been keeping good track of them. And in the 2 hospitals, we did what we could, but they weren't sending us all of their bills to finish it. So we just have to basically send them what we could do and hope that they finish it.
What were their scores like?
The one in Marysville, once we got it all set up, was around 30 or 40, I think.
Could you explain the scale?
Yeah, so Energy Star has a portfolio manager where you plug all your energy use of the building into, and it tells you essentially how efficient your building is. It compares the like buildings in your area. So if you had it's 0 to 100 the score, and if you had 100, then you're like the best building of that type in the area. And obviously 0 would not be good for you. So, yeah.
Is 30, 40 an okay score then?
So it's a little bit below average, I guess. So
Okay.
it's below 50.
Yeah.
Is that a complicated system?
The portfolio manager. It can be tough as long as you have the right energy bills. It's not too difficult. We did, sometimes the hospitals had a tough time answering our questions. We always came with a list that we needed to implement into the portfolio manager. And as long as they had that information accessible, then it was easy, but sometimes that stuff had been buried away, like square footage and questions like that. So it depended on the hospital.
Yeah, and you needed the last year of bills for energy and water and everything, and some of the hospitals had trouble digging some of that stuff up for us, depending on how they filed it, so that was an issue.
For the disposable silverware, the cost that you got, the savings you got, did that account for water and energy usage?
It did not, and on the report, I made sure to mention that it didn't account for the increased water usage.
Okay, so I could follow back to that. So the hospitals used to have durable goods.
Mhm.
Do they still have the silverware?
As far as I know, they still had all of it. It was just in storage. Like, they even, they still run the dishwasher for some things, but it was like hardly anything now, which is interesting.
And I having worked with hospitals, some larger ones, not the small, these guys work with a smaller rural ones. A couple of them were fairly large though, and they had systems in place already based on what I understand. But the smaller ones especially, and even our larger ones, they do have staffing issues, which everybody can relate to. And I know Jacob and I found this at schools, at community colleges, even here at K-State. Sometimes they don't have a dishwasher who shows up, and that plays into their decisions. And but it is really interesting that you guys did this study with the cafeterias. I have a couple of questions on that, but can you talk about the greenhouse gas tools that you use, like for the plastic? How do you find the GHGs versus for the water and the energy?
Okay, yeah, so for energy and water usage, we use the greenhouse gas calculator that was provided to us by PPI. And then for the plastic, we talked to Arthur about it, and we looked into it, and all the sources we could find online said that about 1 ton of plastic equals about 3 metric tons of CO2. So we worked off of that figure for calculating how much was being used with the plastic.
I had a quick question about estimating water waste from like when you arrived at the place, there was like just a pool of water? How did you do that?
Yeah, that's kind of a, a hard answer. Usually I would try to kind of lowball it a little bit. I didn't want to like estimate it like way above what it would be, and then they wouldn't like that answer. I would usually just kind of look at it and guess in about liters how much I thought it looked like, but there was really no good way of doing it, especially because we're only there for one day. You know, if we were there all summer, we could probably find a way to measure it, but otherwise we just have to kind of eyeball it. And I write in all the reports, like, you know, we had to just do it visually. This isn't exact or anything.
I'm sure you interviewed the maintenance person or whatever about the leak and things that all plays into it too. I thought it was, so this is a new project as you guys described, and it's year one. And so we're doing some of the projects that actually this rural healthcare group that we've been working with for a couple of decades, the Kansas Healthcare Engineers Association, they're the ones who asked us for to do this and help them. And so I found it really interesting and really great that what you found was that they had minimal loss in their compressed air leak systems. I know you talked or you tried to look at anesthetic gases too. Do you guys want to say, if there's time, can they speak to that? That wasn't in your presentation, but that was a big part of this. Maybe explain why it's a big part of this and what you were able to find, because we're learning a lot from what you guys did this summer.
Sure, yeah. Anesthetic gas was on our checklist for every hospital that we visited. We essentially told the hospitals pretty much the same thing. Once we learned that it's pretty standardized. All the hospitals had the same scavenging system for the anesthetic gas, the waste anesthetic gas that they used. So the patient would breathe it out during surgery, they would collect it, and they'd throw it into the atmosphere. And that's the process that all the hospitals that we visited used. So we did research and explained to them. I also said the waste anesthetic gas, the reason it matters is it doesn't seem like it'd be that much, but it's much more potent than carbon dioxide. So when you put it into equivalents of carbon dioxide, it's substantial. And so there are technologies being developed to recycle the waste anesthetic gas, but currently it doesn't seem like a feasible option for the hospitals. So what we wrote in our reports was that this is being developed, and likely you should watch out for it because it will likely be available and feasible pretty soon, probably. So that's the best way of doing it, just recycling the gas and using it again. So when that's an option, that's what we would obviously recommend. We also attached articles from the anesthesiology journal about flow rate. We're not anesthesiologists, so without something like that, we would feel weird about saying, "Hey, can you just like lower the flow rate of this patient?" That'd be fine, right? But so we gave them some resources to kind of pique their interest and maybe open their minds to a new way of thinking of lowering flow rate to reduce waste anesthetic gas until that technology becomes more available to the public. Anything else? Okay.
So what type of gases is in the anesthetic gas?
So there's the main ones are they call it desflurane, sevoflurane. What's the third one?
At most places, those are the two they use.
Okay, yeah. I can't remember the time, like how much more potent, but than CO2 it was, but it was in the thousands. Like they were substantially more damaging to the environment. Yeah.
And there's some data out there about, I don't have it on the tip of my tongue, but X% of the GHGs coming out of a hospital that does surgery are actually attributed to these escape anesthetic gases. And it's only been worked on that I can find for about 3 years. So that's why you guys are really pushing the envelope and I know it's uncomfortable, to talk to anesthesiologists about, you know, what they're doing. But we know this is a big push in an area like years ago, we worked with pharmaceutical waste with the pharmacists. And so I just want to compliment you on your work, and I've seen that article that you're including in the reports and things like that. So it's really great. We could maybe share that out to UK too, because it does talk about there's like 3 different kinds, and they're all fluorinated, I believe. That's why they have such a high GHG impact. And then, but I think what I understood from Arthur is that you found all of your hospitals were using the least detrimental one. They'd already moved from this pretty harmful one to the safer one. It was still accounting for a lot of GHG.
Sure.
Cool.